My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship at Case Western Reserve, and I also teach at the Weatherhead School of Management. I'm in my office right now. And it's great to welcome back to campus, although we are excited to get her physically back on campus because she is in Northeast Ohio at the moment. Briggs from LifeWeb360. I recently reconnected with Allie, or connected for the first time. Allie was nice enough to participate in a panel discussion with a number of Weatherhead or Case alums, sort of young entrepreneurs. And it's been great to get to know you, Allie, and hear your story, and felt like we needed more time with you. So thanks for doing today's session. This is also part of Global Entrepreneurship Week in Northeast Ohio. And I want to thank Paul Suchi and the GEW Ohio team for featuring this conversation as part of what's been a fun GEW Ohio set of discussions. Today's discussion is going to be moderated by Emily Nemechek, who is a recent Case alum and now a student in our Mandel School right across the street from me here, studying social work. So it's been great. Emily's also an intern with the Veale Institute team. So Emily, thanks for everything you're doing to support entrepreneurship on campus. I will turn it over to Emily. For those that are on Zoom, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So just let Emily know in the chat if you want to ask a question, and we'll ask if you're comfortable being unmuted and ask it directly. If you want to just put it in the chat, Emily can ask it for you. And if you're watching on LinkedIn Live, Doug and I will be monitoring the LinkedIn live stream. So just put a question in the comment and we will feed it to Emily. So with that, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Allie. And over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I hope everybody's having a good Thursday morning, or I guess early afternoon. It's very exciting for Allie to come back to campus to speak with us all. We were thankfully able to catch up and meet each other last week. So I'm excited to continue the conversation we started having, but with a much wider audience. I see we have participants even in London, which is exciting to see. But I guess the first question I want to just ask you is, how has your career journey led you from Case Western to where you are now, serving as CEO of LifeWeb360?
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like I should say, hey, everybody. Thanks very much for having me, Michael, and for putting together such a thoughtful discussion, Emily. Career journey, I'm already lost. What prepared me, or just how things have progressed?
Yeah, so you graduated from Case in 2011. Right.
Yes. Yeah. So I can just walk you through kind of my journey. So I graduated with a double major in management and international studies from Case. And then I moved from Ohio to New York City, and I worked as a management consultant. So I was at Ernst & Young, working primarily with financial services clients, then moved to Oliver Wyman, moving closer towards strategy work. And then from there, went to PepsiCo and joined their corporate strategy team. I wanted to really get into the hands-on side of things and not just work on things as a consultant, but actually get to see them through to completion. And then I moved to Chicago to get my MBA at Northwestern, at Kellogg. And my goal there was really to take those skills that I had learned in strategy and operations and apply them in technology. And so what I thought that I really, really wanted to do was work at Google and do that type of strategy work there. So I was fortunate to do my internship in my MBA at Google. I got one of the hats. It's really fun. I can speak a lot to the cafeteria. It's great. And I had a great experience there. But when I came back to campus that fall for my second year, I took a course on human-centered design. And that's where the genesis of LifeWeb started. And I had way too much fun being really, really hands-on with the technology. And it's been 2 years and still having fun.
That's great. Were you in Purchase, by the way, when you were with PepsiCo?
Yeah, I was living in Williamsburg commuting to purchase. It's a long.
Yeah. The reverse commute, very impressive. I'm amazed by all the people I know who have done that, and like you really get the city life, but you work in Westchester. And I'm in like the middle between those two places when I'm at home. Well, my dad's there, but
yeah. Phil representing.
So I've spent a lot of time talking with you a little bit about LifeWeb360, and you mentioned how your human-centered design course really helped inspire what would become LifeWeb360. But how has LifeWeb grown since it was founded in 2019, and what does LifeWeb do?
Yeah, maybe I'll start there. Just the quick 101 on our company. Really what we do is we help communities that have lost a loved one or have someone at the end of their life to gather memories and support one another. And so what that looks like is making it really easy for people to share stories, photos, and videos, which are organized by the themes of that person's life to create context and meaning. And really what we're doing is we're preserving all that love and energy and support that's really present right after someone dies, and sort of dissipates right when the bereaved family is really needing that support. And so that's really, we think about what we're doing. The memories can also be transformed into a physical book. And like I mentioned, we work with communities both after somebody has died, as well as people that are hospice care, nursing homes, or even just celebrating a milestone birthday. Really what we're doing is helping people to acknowledge those that have made an impact in their life and pay tribute to them. The class that we started in, I attribute a lot of where we are today, which is a fast growing company that just, it's such a privilege to be able to support people looking for alternatives during this time of social distancing, when we can't come together for a funeral, we can't stop by someone's house to just show up for them. Finding new ways to do that, it's been wonderful for us to be able to play that role for people. Where we came from as really a class project was, starting with a pain point, and a lot of the things that I would imagine the students at the Veale Center of Entrepreneurship are learning around, start with a problem, don't start with a solution, interview a ton of people, get out of the building, just keep talking. You don't know what you don't know. So, long form interviews, and then, rapid iterations of once you've narrowed in on a pain point that you want to tackle, what possible solutions might work, testing it quickly and continuing on. And so that's where we came from. And I can share a bit more about sort of that process, or about how we've grown since then. You let me know where you are.
Really interested in kind of the need for a platform like LifeWeb has existed for a while now. And it's changed a lot because of COVID, because so many of our grieving rituals have been changed because of the restrictions by the pandemic. But I guess, how have you seen like an increase in numbers, or how many people have been memorialized by LifeWeb360? And have you seen a rapid uptick since COVID?
Yeah, what we have seen is definitely a huge growth spurt. And the reason for that is, I mentioned sort of the core problem that we're solving, which is really this time disparity between when friends and relatives want to show support and when a bereaved family is emotionally ready to take in that support. And as you can imagine, typically when there's funeral events, there's calling hours, there's funeral, there's a wake, Shiva, people stopping by the house. There's just a lot of opportunities for story sharing and for being together. And people, even though if you've been through a loss, at a certain point, everyone is going to go back to their day-to-day lives. It's not that they're moving on. It's not that they've forgotten the person, but that concentration of energy, it's going to dissipate over time. It's hard for people to acknowledge that, and you're not thinking about it in the moment. And so really what we exist to do is to capture and harness not only that energy, but quite frankly, just that community and their contact information outside of, you can think about a funeral guest book. Like, what is that? Who's signing this? What do I do with this information? And what was hard, I remember talking with a funeral director around this time last year, and I was explaining this to them, saying, what we really do is we're capturing memories, not condolences. We're focused on celebrating the person's life, not reminding you that they died, not focusing on the funeral logistics and all these other things that really anchor you in your mind to that moment of death, really centering it on that person's life, and talking about the fact that if you don't harness some of that community early on, it's going to be just much more difficult to do that later on when you're talking about friends all over the world, coworkers, friends from summer camp, people that don't necessarily have a relationship with the bereaved family. And the way that the funeral director played it back to me was, so you're telling me that the families I serve, my customers, they have a problem, but they don't know that they have it yet. And by the time they realize that they have the problem, it'll be too late to solve it. I was like, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. And that's a really hard sell. Who are you talking to? Who are you speaking with? What we found with the pandemic is that all of that love and support, it's just harder for people to express it. And so they're really proactively looking for other alternatives. So you have, friends that are looking for ways to support somebody that's grieving, or you see families that did a 10-person funeral in person, or they did a live streamed service, and it's been a couple months and they're feeling like that wasn't enough. I want to do something else to honor my person. And really our kind of belief on all of this is how you commemorate someone, how you honor them. It doesn't need to be a one-time thing. It doesn't need to just be the funeral. There's different rituals around death all around the world. And we do things in one way for the most part here in the US, but there's a lot of different ways to say, you can have a funeral and then you can have a wake. You can have lots of wakes, call whatever you want, story sharing sessions. This can happen over time. 1-year anniversary, you can have a big celebration of life. You can have a dinner to raise money for a fund or a charity that was important to the person. And so that's really where we're supporting communities. And coming back to your question on COVID, we've just seen a lot of people, it's shifted from us trying to explain to people, this is why you should care about this. Believe us, it was people that had been through it already that really got it, to people saying, no, I need to be doing something. And so we've had just a ton of inbound traffic coming to our site and seeing a lot of growth in our community.
That's really interesting and exciting to hear. So you mentioned that you were talking to a funeral director. And I guess one thing that's been very interesting to me is that people tend to shy away from innovating in this space because kind of the memorial space and remembrance space, you can kind of be seen as possibly taking advantage of grieving families. And how do you what are the greatest challenges that you're facing while operating in this sensitive space? And how do you kind of find these families to work with? Do you get referrals from funeral directors or houses of worship, or is it word of mouth?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'll say, having spent a lot of time now with funeral professionals, I have so much respect for the work that they do, and I've yet to meet a funeral director that is in it for the money. They all care so much, and the work that they do is really closer to chaplaincy and just shepherding families through a difficult time. But to your point, it doesn't change the conceptions that people have about having a business that is in the end of life. For me, that was something that was difficult to think about at first. And then we got over it real fast. And the way that we did that was by recognizing the fact, kind of this I don't know if it's a vicious or a virtuous cycle, but the fact that it's difficult for us as humans to acknowledge that we're going to die someday. We don't like to talk about it, and it's awkward and it makes us uncomfortable. And if we haven't had a tremendous loss experience ourselves, if we haven't lost, an immediate family member, a close friend, it's difficult to know, how do you show up for someone else? Do you say the person's name? That's something we hear a lot is, somebody saying, my sister died, and no one will say their name because they don't want to remind me that she died. I didn't forget that she died. Obviously, like I live with that every day. And in fact, their relationship with, their sister, their person, doesn't go away. It has changed a bit. And it's this concept of they maintain a continued bond with that person. But if you haven't been through that, there's a tremendous educational component there. And so for us, my co-founder and I are fortunate that neither of us have had a tremendous loss experience like that. We haven't lost, an immediate family member. And we weren't sure how to approach those initial conversations. When you talk about customer discovery and these frameworks for, 5 whys, like really get in there. We were like, we're not therapists. We're going to be ripping up Band-Aids. How do we approach this in a really empathetic way? And after we started doing customer discovery interviews, we realized we didn't need to be that cautious, because people that have been through this, they're happy to talk about their experience. They're happy to talk about their person. It doesn't need to be sad. Yeah, you're talking about their life. You're recognizing, yes, they died, but by talking about them, you're recognizing that they lived. And so understanding that for us is very powerful. And also understanding that they were very willing to talk about how horrible the experience of their person dying and everyone interacting with them, how horrible that was. And it sounds strange to call it an experience, but it's the most fundamental human experience that we're all going to have someday. And it was bad. And they were like very excited to tell us about this because people hadn't asked them. And so once we understood that and understood precisely because people just feel so uncomfortable in the space, they don't want to be seen as taking advantage, we said, oh my gosh, like we owe it to people that
a better option. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that framing has been really powerful for me of like, people deserve innovation in this. When you've lost somebody close to you, it's the worst week of your life. Like, that demands innovation and the continuation of that, of thinking about how do you turn that into a viable business model. If you want to have exceptional product folks working on this to create a user experience that works for people across age ranges, technical literacy levels, in grief brain, which we've heard described as spaghetti brain, things that make sense. If you want top people trying to solve this in a way that, gets the focus that something like Facebook or another platform gets, then you do need to find a way to make it a sustainable business. And that's another thing that we've learned not to shy away from is we're not really selling to people. One of our mentors, Bob Mesta, has a great book that I would highly recommend, Man-Side Sales. It's all about jobs to be done framework in the context of selling. And, the main nugget from that book is you're helping your users to make progress. You're not trying to sell them something that they don't want. If you really understand the progress they're trying to make in their life and you're helping them move forward, then they're very happy to pay for something that's adding value in their life. I think you had another question about how we're finding folks as well. Yeah. And right now, most of our traffic is coming from a guide that I put together in the early days of the pandemic that is about how to use Zoom for virtual memorial service. It was the first of its kind that was out there. The idea from us was, that's different than what we do, but knowing that the reason our platform exists is because all this support, all this love exists, and we're just trying to give it a home. Knowing that love and support was now going away, we're like, oh my gosh, what can we do? And so the idea was, okay, here's off-the-shelf tools that are easy to use, and we'll just explain to families, things like how to join a Zoom service. Like we put together a PDF that they can share out that explain how to use the controls and mute and things like that are important. People can see you, things that we now know. It's been however many months, but so we put out a version for funeral professionals and another version for families, and that's driven a lot of traffic to our site. And then just referrals after that. That's something that is really heartening to see, is that the experience is resonating with people and they're telling other folks about it.
That's really interesting to hear. One thing that really struck me that you talked about is how willing people were to talk about the experience of losing a loved one and grieving in that process. And it kind of reminded me of that thing where if people have a good experience, they'll tell like 2 or 3 people, but if people have a bad experience, they'll tell like 10.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, things could be so just disorienting while you're going through grieving, where there definitely are so many needs for innovation and change. And having this kind of empathetic technology platform allows you to give people a space to spread out this emotional burden and spread out the time where they're thinking about having just lost a loved one. So it's not everybody's coming to tell you their story, you know, day 2, but you can come reflect back on them and see that over a longer period of time on your own kind of timeline and time frame.
Absolutely. And I love the framing that you just said of if they had a bad experience, they tell many more. I think what's kind of funny about that is maybe that's why people were willing to talk with us and engage, because they wanted to share that they had a terrible experience and they didn't have anyone to share it with other than other people that had already been through it. There's a lot of clubs that, you know, the Dead Moms Club, things like that people create. They're clubs that nobody wants to be a part of. And it's a way, or the dinner party is another wonderful organization for people in their 20s and 30s that have lost someone close to them. It's just ways to find commonality with people that are, you know, in your peer group in some way, that have been through a similar experience, because other people just don't get it. Especially at younger ages. So that was just funny to me, thinking about why people were probably very happy to give us the negative review on their experience.
I have very limited recollections of like good funerals or good funeral stories, but I could tell you so many off the top of my head from just people telling me about bad funeral experiences, just nightmares. Like you're grieving and you can't find your uncle's casket, or you're grieving and nobody can find the funeral home, or this happens or that happens, and that the bad things sticking with you.
Well, and I think just building on that, you know, some of the things that we hear talking with our users, and we still, you know, that's a core thing that we do, is we talk to our users. We do actually later today, I'm talking with one of our users for an hour, just to understand how their experience is going, because we can learn so much from that. One of the things that came out of those discussions was this idea of like the best part of the funeral, which sounds ridiculous when you say that phrase, but what people would say is the best part of the funeral is the stories that are shared, you know, and it's called different things, but sort of this idea of the wake, or maybe the funeral reception, passed around a mic, or maybe it's, you know, you're back at the house later on and it's a smaller group, and people are just sharing stories about the person, and like how powerful that is, and how that's a moment where you're learning something new about somebody that you knew well, but you know, there's always more to learn, and how powerful that is to hear those new stories. It's as close as you can have to a new memory. And so that's actually really where we see ourselves, is we're not trying to replace the funeral. We're not trying to replace any of the things that are going on. We're trying to extend the wake. We're trying to extend that story sharing. And, you know, memories come to you, you smell something, you hear something, it triggers a memory, making people aware that even if it's something, you know, even if you're a coworker and it was something funny that they said, you know, at the water cooler to you, sharing that with the family is huge. It's a gift. It's a small thing, and they want to hear it. And that's a lot that we've done on the product side, is also trying to think about what are the rules of engagement on our platform? What are the ways that the site is set up to try and make people feel like those small things are welcomed?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you're helping people build more perspective around the person they've lost, because I'll always ever only see somebody in relationship to me. So my grandfather, my cousin, my dad, But yeah, you get so many different perspectives with all these people contributing to the LifeWeb that, wow, this is that person's friend or that person's peer, coworker, colleague, relative. Seeing that, it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
A question from the audience.
Oh.
Jessica has asked me to ask this question for her, but she's interested in hearing about the challenges of actually building out the technology that supports LifeWeb360.
Yeah. So I will be the first to say I'm not an engineer. I do not come from a software development background. And yet here we all are having this conversation, and we have a product that is being used by many people in the wild. So I don't know if that was the mindset behind the question, but it's 2020, and my sort of point of view is you don't need to be an engineer to build, talking about who do you need on your bus, who do you need on your founding team. I don't think you necessarily need an engineer because there's so many no-code tools out there to test and learn. I think you need somebody ideally with design experience because the user experience is sort of everything in a world where a lot of technology building blocks are already created. What that means is our original product, our MVP, minimum viable product, we've had several iterations of it, but the first one was a Google form. My co-founder's aunt passed away, and she set up a Google form to collect photos and stories. And like that was it. When you think about creating a new venture, there's so much risk involved, and people tend to, especially if you have an engineer on your team, or if you have a lot of investment early on, it's actually kind of a curse because you just build it. You build all the features that you think that you need. And really what you need to be doing is figuring out, does anybody even care about the problem that you have? And on top of that, did they care enough that at some point in the future, they would give you money to solve that problem? Is it actually a painful pain point? And so again, starting in this class on human-centered design, some of these things on how to test and learn were just beat into our head lovingly. So that was sort of the first iteration. The second iteration of the product was similarly kind of jerry-rigged with a series of third-party tools. There's so many that are out there when you think about no-code tools, but even something like, Squarespace or Wix or Tumblr. We were using a series of third-party tools that we strung together with some lines of code that we had a developer friend write for us, and Zapier, which is the duct tape of the internet. Zapier. Zapier says, if a row gets added to this Google spreadsheet, do this thing over here, trigger this email or something like that. Remarkable what you could do with that. I know this wasn't the question, but even before you do any of that, you can always throw up a sign-up sheet or put it on Craigslist or something like that and say, we're doing this thing, sign up for the wait list. And if nobody signs up, there's a real good indicator that nobody cares about the problem that you're validating. So that's kind of where we started. And then actually when the pandemic hit, we were on our legacy product. We were on that MVP, which was optimized for testing and learning. And what that means is it wasn't designed for scale. It was designed so that if we got feedback or a question from a user, we could really easily change the copy, or we could, add in an additional button or something like that. Because we were just learning. We were just trying to understand what was going to work, what people wanted. We have a complex, we have a lot of dynamics at play when we design our technology. So you've got, two different layers. You've got, from a user perspective, you have the person that created the LifeWeb, that is an admin for the page, and they know what's going on, and they know who we are and why we're here. And then they send it out to a bunch of people that are coming to the site with no context and are supposed to share a memory. The other layer of that is you've got the people that are very close to, they're the bereaved family, or they're very close to the bereaved family. And then you have more outer circles, friends, relatives, coworkers, and everybody is on a different grief journey, which is not linear. It's, in one day, you're across all the phases of stages of grief. I bring all this up to say we had a lot to learn in our MVP phase of like, it's not just what did the admin tell us that they wanted. It's truly what is the job that they're hoping will be done by our product. What are they really hoping for? And it's easy. We found it's, they want memories. They want people to share memories. And so then it's like, okay, now how do we design the product so that the people that can give the memories that are visiting the site, that it'll work for them.
There are two really interesting components to LifeWeb, that design considerations that you guys have taken into account that I'd like to hear a little bit more about. But you guys go over every memory and kind of censor and edit them. And I'm interested in hearing a little bit about that. What made you decide to do it, and is it done? And then privacy. How do you help people give access to the LifeWeb? And have you encountered any challenges with that?
Yeah. Really quickly to close the loop on the last question, we moved off of our MVP and we're now on a fully custom built version of our product. And we worked with a dev shop in Chicago to get that off the ground, which is a really good way, I think, if you can find a partner that you feel like is a true partner, and that will push back on you on your roadmap and things like that. It means that you can get a product that's scalable when you are ready to invest in that and you know what you're investing in. You can get that up and running much more quickly without needing the expertise in-house to be able to coordinate DevOps and all of those things.
Yeah.
On privacy and access, a few things. We are intentionally entering a space that is difficult and emotional and reverent. We're not Facebook or LinkedIn or any other platform that was created for day-to-day social media and then had to grapple after the fact with their users dying. And how do we think about that? I actually think in many ways that's a much more difficult challenge because the rules of engagement were defined in one way. People's expectations about what should happen when someone dies really diverge. For us, because we're intentionally playing in this space and entering this space, we really take seriously the fact that we could do harm. And I mean, we take that seriously. And so the idea of, there's a lot of new podcasts and things out there, like, should this exist? Just questioning what are the ramifications of technology and things like, what should technology platforms be aware of and be responsible for? And for us, to the extent that we can, it's important that we consider what could go wrong. And we do that before it happens, because if it happens, it's going to be devastating for our users who are already in a vulnerable emotional state. And so content moderation ended up being one of those where, when we looked at what is our risk tolerance for something going wrong, we have no tolerance for trolls. I'll say very fortunately and thankful signals that humanity is doing okay. We haven't had any, but That's it was good. Yeah, exactly. It's good, great news for humanity. And I think even the better news is, the screening that we do is to ensure that memories are in the spirit of honoring the person that passed. What does that mean? It doesn't mean LifeWeb's about authenticity. It's about capturing the essence of the person. The example that I like to give is if you call somebody a bitch, not okay. That's a mean thing to say. If you say, she was a bad bitch, and I really looked up to her, based on the context, that could be an extraordinary compliment. And that's great. That's fine. We want to encourage that. Or, if you're talking about your uncle and you want to say, man, he was such a pain in the ass and I miss him so much. That's real. And if that's how you remember that person, it's not a derogatory a derogatory thing. It's really dependent on the context. And so it makes moderation for us difficult, trying to balance those two principles of authenticity to the community and the person that died, or the person being honored, I should say, because again, we have a number of people being honored on our platform that are alive and well, or that are at the end of their life journey. Yeah, I mean, so that's how we think about that. I think as we expand geographically, it becomes more challenging. We already have users in, I'd have to look on our Google Analytics, but over 100 countries. We have people that have, shared memories on our site. You can think about our platform as really being helpful for people with a big diaspora in their community. So people of Indian or Filipino origin, or just the fact that we study abroad, we travel abroad, like you have friends from all over the world. And even outside of the pandemic, it doesn't always make sense to fly back for a funeral. And then if you didn't know the family, what do you do? What do you say? How do you communicate with them? And so we bridge the gap there. So yeah, I mean, this is the big challenge for us is, that's sort of always our guiding light is this in the spirit of honoring the person? And then, when it's necessary, we'll either contact the person that shared the memory, or based on the situation, the admin for the page that just has a better sense of what is in the spirit of honoring the person. Like, if we're not sure, we'll contact them and
always
then
check.
Yeah. And they're so grateful too. Like, people are so grateful that we're doing this and we're looking out for them. And I will say, I think we've had one thing that we, flagged and it came down. Everything else, again, like humanity, we're doing okay. And this is kind of where our corporate vision comes from. The reason that we exist, we like to think is to awaken our empathetic world. And originally we thought about this as we're going to build a more empathetic world. And what we realized is no, actually we're all just doing okay. And if you create a space that's about acknowledging people and saying, you showed up for me in this way, thank you. If you create a space that's about that, people just know what to do. And even though we're in sort of this time of division, it can feel like we're not all in it together, sort of anchoring people around shared experiences, in this case, a shared experience of loss or loving the same person, is really powerful.
Yeah, it's so encouraging to hear that people can respectfully use a platform meant to remember people who have passed away, and that you can open up this space for perspectives, even if they're international, even if you have, a unique relationship with the person you're remembering, but not their family, really just creating that access. It's something that emerging technologies really need to do.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a question that I've seen come up a lot of just, what should platforms be responsible for? And I think it's different based on the platform. And again, I think it's different based on sort of what the starting point was. And it's difficult to do well. And for us, it was something that we just made the decision on pretty early on as a team, which has been helpful because, we have it as a guiding principle. On your other question around access, so the way that we think about that, we have 3 different privacy settings. We spent a lot of time thinking about what those should be and how to package them. Again, grief brain, understanding what is an entirely new tool. It feels similar to other tools that you might have used, but it's a new experience. Decision fatigue is real. So we went with the rule of 3. We've got 3 options. So the default that is by far the most chosen one is community mode. So that means that anybody can share a memory, anybody can view memories. Then there's something called invite only mode, which means that you need to be invited by the page admin to view or to share memories. And then the last group is a pretty interesting hybrid that we call private letters mode, which means that anybody can share a memory, but only people that have been invited in can view the memories. And that ends up being really helpful. And in a lot of use cases, I'll say, I think what we see people doing most is they're not sure what's going to happen. This is new. What are people going to say? They don't know what we know yet, that people are not jerks. And so it allows them to start it in private letters mode, harness that energy as it's coming in, and then they can always flip the switch and put it into community mode later, which we really encourage because it's nice. It's nice for the whole, we're serving the bereaved family first and foremost. That's who is top of mind for us, but it's really a page, it's a space, it's like an art project that's created by the entire community. So it's nice if people can see that.
Yeah, really creating a collection like that. So I know that Michael has some questions and a shout out for you.
Oh, I get to do the shout out? Okay. Shout out came, Ali, from Yunus Keita. He says hello from Bamako, Mali. So this is
Hi.
I did have a quick question, and it's a little bit of a pivot from the about your business and a little bit more about you and your journey. I mean, this is part of Global Entrepreneurship Week Ohio, and then there's a number of folks who are on today's call that I know care very deeply about kind of ecosystem. I mean, you're sitting in Akron, and it's interesting. There are a number of people kind of from the region because of COVID who have found themselves back in the region for the first time, maybe staying with family or friends. We've talked for a long time as Clevelanders about talent and keeping talent, and even your own journey, kind of growing up in the region, going to Case, and then moving to Chicago and other places. I think is typical. I mean, folks, as a parent, you want your kids to sort of go off and sort of see the world. I'm wondering if you can, and I know this Akron is a stop along the way as you sort of head to Brazil and doing even more remote work. I'm wondering if you can maybe comment on what this moment, as we kind of look past the pandemic, might mean in terms of remote work, talent, and Northeast Ohio. I mean, and I know this is a strange time to be doing business anywhere, but I wonder if you could sort of reflect on your time back in the region and any thoughts you might have about how we keep and retain talent in the region.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on that. And also, I don't know who's seeing this that is out there in the ether, but if you don't know, surprise, I'm moving to Brazil.
Oh, okay. Don't tell me anything that you don't want me to broadcast.
No. We're just, I haven't.
It's a very different region.
Yeah, good way to announce. I mean, a few things before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, our team was transitioning to a remote team. So we're a Chicago-based company. That's a lot of that is because we were founded there. We founded it while we were at Northwestern, and then we were working out of 1871, which is a phenomenal incubator. Just been a wonderful partner to us, and there's a big mentor network through 1871, and so a lot of our mentors and advisors are Chicago-based. And my co-founder and her wife are in Chicago, and that's where they want to stay. However, my partner and I were figuring out what was going on with his job. He's a job he got a job back in Brazil, is sort of why we're moving. He's Brazilian. And so we knew that we were transitioning to a remote team. And in fact, I was actually about to move out to San Francisco, where he was living, right when the pandemic got kind of crazy, and decided to come back to Akron instead. I think that for us, it opens up a tremendous opportunity for talent. We're interviewing right now for a product manager role. And because of the nature of some job boards, we're still skewing towards more candidates coming in from Chicago, just the way that the job boards kind of display things. But we have top candidates from all over the country, and in fact, all over North America. And I would love to consider candidates from all over the world. Time zones become a bit of a challenge. And also, quite frankly, as a small startup, figuring out how to do hiring. It's just is more difficult. But I think specifically to your question, Michael, on Northeast Ohio, I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for people to be part of the startups that they want to be a part of, or the work communities that they want to be a part of, without having to be away from family or all that this region has to offer. I lived in New York for 6 years and then Chicago for 2. My whole family is here in Akron. I've loved being back. I've loved being back during this time. I ate so much Swenson's. It's just, I appreciate things about this area so much, especially during the pandemic, the ability to be outside and drive 10 minutes and be at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. And there's tremendous innovation resources in this region. And so I do truly think, just what's happening, you're seeing startups leaving the Bay. I was moving out to the Bay because that's where, again, my partner was, but we didn't want to stay there. You can't buy a house there. It's so expensive. And if I think about starting a company out there, how much more affordable it is to find talent at the price range that we can afford at this stage. We couldn't hire anybody that wasn't on a trust fund, that needed to live in San Francisco. It just wouldn't work. And so I think this is going to be a pretty sustained trend. I don't know. I'm very excited about the prospect. And I think if you're a remote first company, that just makes things easier, because then it's not a matter of, Jason Fried of Basecamp wrote a book, Remote, like 10 years ago. I've got it on my side table, and it's funny looking back at it, because it's a lot about, people will think you're crazy, and if you're going to do it anyways, here's some tactics. And now people don't think it's crazy anymore. And when you're not trying to involve one person that's across the country in a meeting that's in person, but rather everybody is virtual, or the tools that you use. We use Miro as a virtual whiteboarding tool, how you store files, how you communicate, what you prioritize in your employees' communication is super, super, super important when everyone's going to be remote. I'm for it all the way. I think it'll stick.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the future of remote work and how companies will operate like that. We'll all be like, 10 years down the line, what did COVID do to entrepreneurship? Oh, we're now all across the world. So. Yeah,
I mean, that was sort of, when we were deciding kind of where to go next, it was, well, we don't know how long this is going to last for. And I guess that's, since everything's remote anyways, let's just plan our life in this way. And it opens up more opportunities as an entrepreneur, work from another country.
Well, I see we just got a question in from Inez. It says, thank you so much for this. You were mentioning how your users diaspora, and I was wondering if you were noticing other trends coming from your consumers. Do they tend to be young, etc.?
It's a great question. I would say it's hard to say trends, right? Because if you look at death statistics, and I have, you see who's the volume of people that are dying. And of course it's older individuals, as you would expect. I think that we disproportionately have younger users on our platform, younger users being honored on our platform, like the person that, people are sharing memories of, relative to the number of people in those age groups that are dying. However, what's been really interesting is that across the spectrum of age range, how the person died, their type of community, where they are geographically, I wouldn't say that we're seeing like a strong trend where we're only indexing in one or the other. It's actually, it's been interesting to see the variety of use cases. So we have people that are using it where they're just sharing memories for themselves. Like this is for me, sort of invite only, but I don't invite anyone else. And this is just my space for reflection. We see older people that died in their 90s. And when you think about, we're LifeWeb360, part of that is, easier to get the domain. Part of that is it's a 360-degree memory of all the different people that knew the person in different ways. And when you're older, the 360 aspect becomes difficult because there's less people that were older than you that are alive to be able to share a memory. However, we see, extended families, peers, staff and doctors in the person's nursing home, sharing things. Those are often some of the more colorful memories that are great. And then, that slides down all the way to children that have passed or people in their 20s. And there, it's just a really different type of community. And also, the sentiment is different. You're getting those joyous memories, but you're also getting people just, it's a more difficult time. It can be harder to celebrate someone's life when it was taken really, really too soon. Yeah. There's something else I was going to mention, but I would say, on the whole, we see all different folks finding a home.
I guess we have to wrap it up in a moment, but I have one additional question to add on to that. Has anyone ever, you mentioned this, I think, before, that people have been started to be memorialized before they've passed, but has anyone ever actively attained a LifeWeb for themselves, or people with terminal illness versus sudden death? Do you see changes in the way people plan?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is actually a large percentage of our user base is for people that are in hospice, nursing homes, and to a lesser extent, again, any milestone occasion. The way that I like to think about it is LifeWeb works anytime that you would give somebody a toast. And so we use LifeWeb for my grandma's 90th birthday in April. And that was a great way for my family to be able to tell her, what she's meant to us. And so, yes, we're working with people that are in hospice care. I think it's not so much that they're creating it for themselves. It's that somebody else is creating it, for them. Mm-hmm. And I do think that thinking about what makes our platform different in a space that is empathetic and compassionate is the fact that
it's safe as well.
Well, and it's this idea of many social media platforms, if you want to think of us in that way, are about me sharing out to some audience. So it's Twitter, it's me sharing out to a large amount of people, or maybe it's a private blog, it's me sharing out to a close group. What LifeWeb is the opposite. It's many people sharing to me or about me. And so that just fundamentally changes what you see on the platform. A lot of the things around narcissism or FOMO or some of the toxicity that's been talked about a lot in popular media recently. I think that's a big reason why you don't see that. But absolutely, we're seeing people honored in that way while they're able to appreciate it. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is that from talking to our users, what's happening is there's a halo effect to their life where my friend dies, it's my peer. I now understand, oh my gosh, I'm going to die someday. How am I going to be remembered? How am I going to spend the time that I have left? I wish I would have told my friend this. I'm going to go call my mom right now and tell her, thank you for making me PB&J every day. And that's kind of comes back to our vision of awakening our empathetic world. It's this idea that there's definitely a ripple effect of compassion and empathy that we can help steward by meeting people in this really precious emotional and mental state where we're holding space for those big conversations that we just typically don't.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ali, from Akron, but have a safe move to Brazil. We at the Veale Institute wish you a healthy and safe trip and the best of luck. All of your LifeWeb endeavors that are coming up with finding new people and everything. I guess I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Thanks so much, Emily. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks, Emily. You did a great job. Phil, hopefully, she passed the dad muster for moderating. We're thrilled that we have Emily on the team. That was awesome, Emily. Ali, thank you so much. We don't usually do breaking news as part of the Veale Institute series. So your Brazil move, maybe our first breaking news. Apologies again.
No, it wasn't a secret. We just need to do, a cutesy announcement post with a little Brazilian flag or something.
But thanks for doing this. Hopefully we will get to see you down kind of in University Circle before you leave. And it's great. I think you had some great messages here today for those that joined, and we look forward to continuing to cheer on LifeWeb360 and all that you're accomplishing, because it's a great story, and I know there's a lot yet to come. So thank you for doing this.